are you ready to experience the hodl rate going up? Right now, the hodl rate, the 1 year hodl rate just hit a new all-time high. What that means is 70% of Bitcoin has not moved for over a year. That means that people are buying for longer and longer periods of time. They are holding on to their asset. Why? Because the new type of buyer they don't need liquidity, right? It's not the person who got lucky owning Bitcoin. Not lucky, that's a very bad way of saying it, but it's not the person who basically bought Bitcoin on a flyer and it worked out, right? That's not the person that's here now. The person that's here now doesn't need the cash flow. The person that's here now doesn't, because they have a property portfolio that's giving them cash flow, right? They have a business that's giving them cash flow. So they don't need the cash flow. They can just hold the asset and leave it forever until it goes up. That's why the hodl rate is starting to climb. Just as people were saying, oh no, as the price goes up, the hodl rate will go down. I've been saying this for months. The hodl rate is about to go up, right? The hodl rate is about to go up because this new buyer is terrifying. And the reason why they're terrifying is because Bitcoin's the first asset where you can't mess with the supply of it, right? No other asset. If it was a real estate, you can mess with the supply of real estate, right? I can just issue a bunch of orders to, increase the supply of 3-bedroom houses, right? I can, if I want to tighten up demand, I just do what they did, tighten up interest rates, and the demand comes crashing down. So there's a lot that I can do on real estate. I can't do that with Bitcoin. Once they start buying, imagine you've got, people worth $1 million to $10 million decide to put 10% of their net worth into Bitcoin over the space of a year, right? Like and all of that Bitcoin is off the market. They will hold it forever. So this new buyer is terrifying. Now, I do believe that there will be some kind of churn at around the $100,000 to $500,000 level as the people who, educated themselves but really took a flyer on Bitcoin and now made a bunch of money start to liquidate. But that's about when this new buyer is going to start coming in. And then this new buyer is never going to sell. They might be able to only buy one Bitcoin at $100,000, but they will never, ever let that Bitcoin go. It's not like they're going to sell it when it gets to $1 million. They're just never going to let it go because they understand the value of generational assets. It's not like the person who got into Bitcoin at $1,000 and wants to cash out at $100,000 to buy a house finally because they've been eating ramen noodles and this, that, and the other because they think they're part of the pleb crew. Like, this new buyer is different. They're not hanging out, at Bitcoin conferences. They're hanging out at the country clubs, right? They're not hanging out, at these low-brow places. Like, I don't know what other way to say it. These people are in communities. They are organizing. They are competitive. Once one person says they got into Bitcoin and they generate an X return, everyone else in their community wants a piece of it, right? So, and news in this community of a good investment spreads very, very quickly because they all know that the people that they talk to are comfortable with taking risk, right? So they'll tell everyone about it. They're not might not execute on it, but they'll at least tell everyone about it. And the mind space in that community, in this new buyer's consciousness, is going to increase. And yet people are not really talking about this. The dynamics of the market is going to shift. I've been saying it for months. The hodl rate is going to increase, and you got to get your position secured. If you're someone who is even in the category that I'm speaking about here, you're early at this point and it feels uncomfortable, and you're probably sitting there going, I've got a real estate portfolio, I don't know whether I should allocate into this or not. Here's the thinking. If you've got $1 million real estate portfolio and you can't afford to take, or you can't mentally get yourself to take a 0.3% risk on one Bitcoin, are you actually rich? Are you actually in the financial position that you think you're in? Or are you a slave to that property portfolio? People who are worth, let's say, a minimum of $5 to $10 million, when you study any of their wealth reports, which most people are not doing because all they care about is the price going up, not really analyzing the market dynamics behind why the price is going up, which is what I'm trying to do, is trying to help people understand, yes, the price is going to go up, but understanding why allows you to decide what action to take next, which is why I think it's extremely important that you subscribe to this channel, because by you subscribing, it spanks the YouTube algorithm to put out Bitcoin content in front of more people. And at the end of the day, my parents, who I've spoken about repeatedly, if they're sitting there and they didn't have me on board to actually help them understand what Bitcoin is and why they need an allocation to it, they wouldn't be allocating until it's too late. And that's really what's going to happen. Now, the problem with it being too late as we move forward into this next cycle that's coming up in 2024, we've got the ETF, we've got institutional interest being given pretty much a green light from the SEC, the IRS, everyone else, that you can invest in Bitcoin, but you better watch yourself if you invest in any of these other shit coins. This is going to be a phenomenal ride here. The next party that's coming into Bitcoin are people who have the majority of their wealth in real estate. They have the majority of their wealth in real estate. Now, what does this mean? This is, on the one hand, we can say, okay, they have the majority of their wealth in real estate, and so they don't understand Bitcoin, but they're about to understand Bitcoin. And so if you're one of these people that's watching this is the journey that you're about to go through. You've been holding real estate probably for 20 or 30 years. Everything that you know has been work, save up money, buy real estate, generate cash flow, etc., etc. And you're about to face a reality where real estate starts underperforming. Now, the ones of you who will make it to the other side will decide to act and diversify that real estate portfolio, and you'll use the real estate portfolio to actually give you the leverage to actually diversify into Bitcoin, kind of like what my parents did in leveraging their property portfolio to actually buy Bitcoin. And what that allowed them to do is keep the property portfolio so that it continues generating the cash flow, and the cash flow is paying for the Bitcoin that they bought, right? And so that's one way to do it. And that's probably the smartest way for most real estate investors, because Bitcoin is extremely new for you. And it's new for them. If you know someone who's in real estate, been in it for 20 years, it's been the one asset, or maybe even longer than 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, anyone whose their wealth is inside of real estate, they've got a certain comfort with that real estate. They've got a certain amount of inflexibility when it comes to, what do I do with this asset? They don't really care about the future. What they care about is maintaining what they have. And that is the new terrifying buyer that's going to come in. Why? Because they've been trained for 30 years to hold on to assets. They're not like this previous generation of buyers in the Bitcoin space, which are, majority on the generality. I'm not talking about the individual people who are smart enough to hodl forever. I'm talking on the generality wise, people are looking at it like, in essence, a trade. They're looking at it like, I can flip this from $3,000 to $69,000, and they're looking at it like an investment in a watch, right? Or an investment in a stock, a meme stock or something like that. That's how they're looking at Bitcoin. But this new buyer that's coming in has been absolutely trained for 30 to 40 years on holding assets and never ever letting them go. These are people who have, got probably sitting on, 40 to 60% of equity in their portfolio that could easily refinance their portfolio as soon as, the interest rates come down, or even some might be able to do it right now, and buy into Bitcoin, right? They could easily do that. Their portfolio has the loan to value bandwidth in order to maintain the payments. They don't even need to come out of pocket. They're just taking money from one place at a lower interest rate and putting it in another place. Imagine that. You got a $5 million property portfolio. You borrow $1 million against it. You buy up your Bitcoin. You're paying let's say by the time this next cycle comes around, they're paying 4.5%, and Bitcoin's compounding at 80%. This is how these people think. This is not, and the reason why this is terrifying is that they're not going to move until they understand it. But once they understand it, they're never ever going to let go. $37,000 investment to get into one Bitcoin, and you own the scarcest, hardest asset humanity has ever known. Right? You've still got your $1 million property portfolio that's generating you cash flow. So there's really a lot of fear around this, and a lot of this fear is going to get plugged. And how we know that the fear is getting plugged is because the hodl rate continues to increase. The hodl rate is extremely important, and I urge you to study that hodl rate and understand what it actually means and how it actually works, because this new buyer of Bitcoin is absolutely terrifying. Once they get their hands on Bitcoin, they're never ever gonna let go. And that's the one part I'm trying to get people to understand, because if you don't have an allocation yet, you are really risking this, because the moment that ETF is approved, and nobody knows when that's gonna happen. The Bloomberg guys can say it's gonna be January, but truthfully speaking, no one knows when it's gonna happen. It could be today, it could be tomorrow. You could wake up on Monday and realize that there's a Bitcoin ETF been approved, and the price has just run away from you from 37,000 to 67,000. You just don't know, right? You don't know, I don't know, they don't know. They're definitely more experts at analyzing ETF markets, so they probably have more of an idea, but you just don't know, right? And again, their prediction is before January 10th. So here's my point. Understand this new buyer. This new buyer comes from a real estate background. They come from the background that doesn't allow them to let go of assets once they own it. Once it starts performing, they cannot let go of it. This is the same market that's been looking at Bitcoin like a watch investment or a highly speculative investment, and they're about to change that to a highly essential investment. And you don't want to get caught up in that, and you will get caught up in that if you haven't got to your one Bitcoin. And why is that? Because it's quite simply the hardest, most scarcest asset on earth, and they've been chasing scarcity their entire lives, and now they're about to wake up to the fact that Bitcoin is the single most scarcest thing that they can ever own. You don't think they're going to move towards that once they understand it? Time is literally running out now, and if you haven't got your allocation, it's time to get your allocation. And if you have, understand what it is, allocate more to it, and earn more money, get more fiat, put it into Bitcoin, because at the end of the day, what else are you going to do, right? What else are you going to do? What other options do you have? Now, the truth is, despite all of this, there are still only 3 rules to Bitcoin. Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.